Hello and welcome to Pro Modelers. One of this month's builds is going to be the Italeri 172 scale Jaguar T2, which is the train and two-seat version. This particular build is going to be more for the beginner. We're going to be covering things like sanding and filling and really making a good kit. Straightforward, basically out of the box. The only thing I'm going to change, as I do with most 172 kits, is the seats. The thing is, the cockpit is that small, you really can't see much in there anyway, but the seats tend to be a nice little touch, and literally just for a couple of pounds you can put replacement seats which will really enhance the entire kit and bring it to life. So we're going to be using the Airwaves seats. You get two resin seats there which are very nice. Your standard type of thing in your kit. That's out. You actually get, so you'll find your instructions that you'll follow through. Your decals, clear parts which are nicely separately bagged. Looking at those, they don't seem to be too bad. With this particular one, you've got recessed panel lines. All looks pretty nice straight out of the bag. You've got some nice detail in for the actual cockpit tub itself. Obviously, looking ahead for various problems we might have is obviously fitting the top wing, because it's one top part, onto the top, air intakes, and obviously getting a nice join for the front fuselage and putting it all together. But hopefully as we go through it, I'll show you some little tips and tricks of how to make the best joins without having to go around hours and hours and sanding and filling, and we'll work through it together. So okay, because we're doing this as a beginner's build, I'm going to do it with very limited tools to show you, what you're going to do to need. Obviously we're going to use our disposable craft knife, pair of tweezers, always handy to have, clamping tweezers. Now obviously, if you've got clothes pegs, things and bits and pieces like that, but obviously some type of clamps. Some rubber bands, always handy for holding bits together. Scissors, obviously for cutting the sprue. Obviously I've got here a small drill bit, but obviously you could use anything with a point on the end. And obviously some type of filler. I've got here Squadron Green putty, but literally anybody's putty will do. We're basically just going to use those basics to build the entire thing. Now obviously we've got brushes and bits and pieces like that, but you can just buy what you need and then build up your collection. It will be airbrush, because obviously I airbrush all my models, but there you go. This will just be showing you really the basics of what you need to build it. So okay, with all your buildings, have a look through all the instructions completely and familiarise yourself with all the bits and pieces. Obviously we've got here, it starts with building the seats and putting the cockpit areas together. We've got these little resin replacements which I'll show you in detail in a moment, so we won't have to worry about that. But obviously we've got the cockpit and then the sides come together, so you can really see how it's going to come together, and then you can vary how you'll do it to how it's laid out, because the classic is most kits they'll have you put the undercarriage on halfway through the build. I always do it very last thing that will go on. Obviously these are things that get knocked off and obviously cause problems during painting. Things like canopies and glasswork I can tend to do last as well. But basically, if you have a look through, decide what sort of colours and markings you're going to do it in. If you're going to take your time and a few weeks to do it, then fair enough, and you can plan ahead to buy in your particular paints and your colours you're going to need. If you're planning on doing it as a sort of a weekend type thing, to do it all in a weekend, then you can obviously work through and see which stages you're going to be at. So familiarise yourself even with all the layout and how it's going together. Perhaps have a look at some of the parts on the sprue, and just to see where they are, and then you can plan your build. Okay, so the first thing some people do, that different people do, falls on against, is either painting on the sprue or off the sprue. I always paint off the sprue, purely because then you don't have to go around and do all the little touch-ins afterwards. Some people do it on, some people don't. Personal choice, I don't. So for the moment we're just going to whip the tub out and the control columns and sticks. So we have that one out. Obviously the seats we don't need to worry about. Oh, and the other thing I forgot is a file. You'll need a file as well. So we've got the tub cut out, and we've got all these little bits in here. Obviously we're working in 172 scale, so everything's a lot smaller. Cleaning up your parts, obviously with your sanding sticks. Now you don't have to go out and buy anything special. Nail files work just as well, and then as they start to wear down, they become quite handy for doing other little jobs and bits and pieces. But we just clean up the parts, general rub all over, so you're all smooth. Blow out all the dust. Same with the other bits as well. Just a little bit on the sides there. Just like that. Now you tend to find with the 172 scale kits, they're very straightforward at going together. If you're just starting out in the hobby, there's a company called Hobby Boss, and they make some terrific little 172 kits which go together very, very nicely, very straightforward, and then you can sort of, you know, progress on with your painting and that very quickly. But anyway, one thing I would advise starting out is not to be chopping in with a knife doing your small parts. If I just bring you in a little bit here, obviously you get your small parts like this little control column. It's easy to get in there with a knife and just trim them off just a little bit, just like that, to lose the things. But if you're starting to do things on, you know, perhaps sides or walls like this and bits and pieces, the trouble is if you go in, it's very easy to slip in and take a chunk of it out. So I would always use a file, keep it flat, and just go down the sides like that. The same way as when you're cleaning off parts of the actual kit, you know, obviously we've got the side here. If you was to go in with a knife, you might make a little dip, and then obviously when you put the other half together, like so, you end up with a dip, and then you have to fill it or it's going to look odd and all the rest of it. But if you use a sanding stick and keep it flat to it, completely flat, and you can feel when it's actually sanding off and when it's not. But as long as you keep it sort of 90 degrees flat and you don't sort of start curving in like this, obviously, because you'll be making it, make sure you're square on top, or if anything you're coming in slightly for a little bit over the top. So we just trim off this tiny bit off the control column down the back here. The other thing as well, just if you are starting off, these disposable knives are great. And also they're not razor sharp. If you get really sharp ones, perhaps they're good for getting various bits and pieces, but if they're too sharp, they end up running away with you, and before you know it, you're actually cutting things apart. So there we go. These parts are all done, and we're all ready for spraying now. Or you could just brush paint, but because of the cockpit of the actual Jaguar on the inside is black, everything's completely black. It's a nice straightforward way of doing it. So what we're going to do, we're going to get a bit of, well, we've got blue tack here, or whatever it is wherever you are. Then I use, I've got these long kebab sticks. Okay, then all you do, put a couple of blobs on like that. Okay, then you can put your panel and just stick them on, and this way you can spray them, or if you wanted to, because of this scale it's quite small, you could actually paint them just as easily as well. And then obviously with the little control sticks as well, if you get a sausagey bit, just stick it down, put a pinch, and then you can actually stand these up just like that. And that's all good for painting. Now, as I say, at this scale you could just simply paintbrush it, nobody's ever going to notice. But what we've got here, we've got these little resin seats as well. And I know we've spoken about resin in other tutorials and bits and pieces around the site, but you can get in, he says. You can't even get into it today. Pushed in a little bit too much, here we go. Right, here's our tiny little resin seats, which have actually got little moulded seat belts, which is really what makes the difference. Now if we bring you in quite well, here we are. Here's our tiny little seats. As I say, got little seat belts and all the little details. Now that's far superior to what you're going to get in a kit, and really it's the only thing you're going to see inside the cockpit, as we were saying. You should get your little instructions as well here, which will give you little paint call outs of what colours are and all the rest of it. Now the actual frame and everything else inside a Jaguar is actually black. Now what we can do, we can cut these bits off the bottom. So if we just take our razor saw, okay, keeping it completely flat, 90 degrees, we can just slice off the bottom. Now these are just the casting plugs, which obviously when it's poured in the mould they can be pulled out. That's all they are. Now the thing is, they're not nice resin, so as soon as you can, move those out of the way, get yourself a cloth, okay, and get rid of that dust. Yeah. Right, okay, taking your, let me just bring you in a little bit, taking your little pin vise, okay, just skewer it right into the main part of the seat. We bring you in. Okay, so we're going to go right into the main part of the seat. So you see it travels up through the middle. Don't go in too near the bottom of the seat cushion, otherwise you're going to come up through the cushion of the seat. So we're just going to skewer in like that, in one. And then same on the other one. Okay, just like that. And then taking a couple of cocktail sticks, we're just going to poke those up in the hole, just like that. So they're on and all skewered. Same for the other one. Okay, so we've got both of those on there now, and they're all ready to be painted. So I'll just sort out some black paint. Okay, so what we've got is some Tamiya satin or semi-gloss black. We've got our Evolution airbrush, which has got a 0.4 needle set in it, and we've got our paint. Now this is slightly thinned, don't want too much. Just going to pop that in like that. Okay, let me just check our flow. That's perfect. Okay, so we'll start with our seats. Obviously we just want to do, I'll bring you in a little bit. Obviously for the moment we don't want to be going in there blasting away, so we'll just do little puffs, if you like, all over, just like so. And as I say, it's not completely black yet, it's just a little bit. So what we have here is a little bit of foam. We can just poke it in there. Same on the other one. We're just going to go like that. Okay, and the same with the instrument panel. The control columns. Just start off, a little coat over the top, nothing major for the moment. Cockpit sides as well. As I say, just a small dusty coat, and work around all your model bits like so with these little dusty coats. And then what we'll do, we'll just let those dry off, which won't take long, it's just a moment, and then we can go back and go over them again, and that'll make them fully black. So we're just spraying them black. So okay, we just finish off spraying these seats. As you can see, they all come out very, very nice and black. Same with the instruments. It's quite handy doing this type of aircraft because, say, everything's black on the inside, so it's a nice straightforward job. There we go, we're all done. So there we go, those have dried, just giving those a bit of a blow with a hairdryer. Now the next thing we're going to do is bring all these little details to life. Obviously, as we said before, there's no point going totally overboard because you're never going to see most of it. So what we've got here is a little bit of neutral grey, which is XF53 Tamiya. Giving it a good shake already. Okay, and then all we do, we've got our dry brushing brush, which is our flat one, which is very old and very, very warm. It's got a little bit of silver on it as well, which will just give a bit of depth. And then all we're going to do, just into the lid of the cup like that, and then dry brush, just knock off all the excess off there once, and then go back and do it again. Because what you've done, the first time you've done that, you've sort of moistened all the bristles as well, and sort of conditioned them into dry brushing. Because otherwise, if you do it straight away, you might get little crispy bits and flat bits and dead bits. So most of it's all off, and then obviously we'll bring you in a bit so you can see this a bit better. Okay, so then straight down, and then gentle brushes to start with. Nothing too heavy, too hard. Little flicks if you like. And then you can get slightly rougher as you go. And what we're trying to do, we're trying to scrape off and put down paint almost all at the same time. Because where we're scraping it off, you're sort of getting that worn look. Okay, so then all we'll do, we'll load up with a little bit more paint, dry brush that off again. Okay, and then gently rubbing all those details to life. I don't see, no, there you go, you can see that quite nicely, it comes together quite well. Same with the instrument panel. So you can see both of those. Let's get you in shot, there we go. Okay, so nice little rub, all directions, all over. And laying that paint just on top. There we go, just like that. And then we're going to do the same with the side walls as well, because there's a few little details on there, and it will just help to bring those bits to life. And obviously the other thing it's doing is slightly giving it a dull, flat look, that sort of worn area. And then we're going to do the same on the seats everywhere as well. So when you notice it's running down and you're starting to perhaps scratch paint a little bit too much, just a little bit more paint on the brush. Okay. You just dry brush absolutely everywhere. Just like so. Same on the other one. There we go. And then what we can do afterwards, we can go around and actually pick out individual colours of harnesses and that with a very small brush. But to start with, you get your dry brushing done. It just gives it that little bit of depth. And that's that bit done. Okay, whilst we've got all these bits out, obviously we said we're not going to see much, but we'll do these little bits as we go. In the middle here, if you can see, there we go. You've got the little circle for the moving map and various bits and pieces. So what we'll do, we're just going to give that a dollop of green. So then all we'll do, take a cocktail stick. And we just have our lid of it just here, just like that. And then all we do, take a little, roll your cocktail stick like that, and then over to your area and just tap and push it to the outsides. Just like that, it's one, all done. Okay, same with the other one. There we go, and it will just give that little bit of depth in the cockpit we were talking about. So that's those done. So okay, in the cockpit tab now, we've just got the control sticks, just pop them off of there, and we've got the instrument panels. Get them off. They're still a little bit wet, so obviously we have to be a touch careful with those. Right, just make sure we got the seat round in the right way for the full front and back. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're just going to fit these in. So if we use a tiny little bit of our glue, okay, just down in those welds where obviously the seat, the instrument panel and the control stick sit. Obviously we have the more triangular one first for the front one. Okay, and we're just going to sit that in like so. And we'll get the control stick with some tweezers just to make it a bit easier for getting it in. Like so, same for the rears. And there we go, that's them in there. It might be worth just putting a drop of glue on the backs of the instrument panels there, just where they join, just to hold them securely in place. And we can let that dry now. Okay, so the next thing is to get this forward fuselage together. Now we're all dry and everything. Now when you put it in, you're looking for little locating sort of tabs and bits and pieces for it to go in. Now this one, obviously you've got the wheel well for the nose gear is the bottom half of the cockpit as well, so it all has to sort of line up. So there's a little tab just down the back there, if you can see, just in there, and then obviously it's flush on the bottom. And for the moment we're just going to sort of test fit it and see what happens. So we'll just pop the other half on, and there we go, it all joins and lines up. Now if it doesn't line up, obviously there's something in there that needs to be moved. So what we'll do, we'll take this side off, and we'll take our bit of liquid cement, and we're just going to put a drop just down the back in here, just down there, and one little one at the front, and just at the bottom of this leg as well, just like so, just to help hold that together a bit. And then we'll get the top on like so. And then what we can do, you can either clamp, you could, you know, obviously this type of thing going on here to hold together, but I quite like obviously rubber bands. When you're popping rubber bands onto it, it gives it a sort of better grip. So what we do, we just run a rubber band around the middle section like that. Okay, and then what you want to do is just make sure you're square, obviously, for your joining together. So we'll just put a drop here in the back, just like so, and let that sort of flow with a capillary action down everywhere. And the back edge, and then just a little bit for the moment. Not getting too near these rubber bands, because the thing is, if the liquid cement goes under it, it will travel both sides, and it can ruin your plastic underneath, like so. So we just do these top bits as well. Obviously it doesn't matter if your glue takes the paint off, because that's just something we'll touch in afterwards. We'll just pop a clamp on the back, just like that, so it holds it all together, like so. Whilst we're talking about it, obviously in the olden days when you were using your glues, you may be having things like this. Now the trouble with that is, when you put a bit down, you put it together, it squirts out, you get messy joints, and also this stuff is very brittle. When it dries, it sort of snaps and, you know, joins like that. Personally, you know, this is a free one that comes out of some of the kits you get sometime. I don't use it at all. I actually like using the liquid cements. This is the extra thin cement. Now the beauty with it is it's got great capillary action. Literally you just touch it on a join, and it flows down and welds the joint. So I'd highly recommend of, you know, improving your model work, switching from, you know, a tube glue like this to a liquid poly. The poly welds as well, so you've got a good gap sort of capability, bridging and welding together and things like that. But it does vastly improve your modelling overnight by just switching your glue. Okay, the next thing we've got is the rear fuselage. Now, a bit of dry fitting to see how we fit. Obviously we've cleaned up all the joints. It's a bit complicated because obviously we've got this back part that goes in too. Now it's probably easier just to pick a side, and we're going to do this half at a time. So we're going to put this half in, make sure it's all level and straight, and then we'll move on. Now, a little technique for using complicated things like this is that I'll actually use a super glue. Now for that we have our super glue. Normally have a tray or something, but just to show you, just pop it down on a piece of plastic, like so. Okay, take a cocktail stick or a toothpick type thing, like that, and just put a smidging of super glue down one side, quite a thin, down like that, and then take your part and then pop it in. Now this isn't a quick setting super glue, this is quite a slow one. So why are we using the super glue? Basically two things. One, it's a tricky join, so if you were using it with the liquid cement, you get movement and it all tends to jog about and all the rest of it. Whereas if you're using this type of thing, it dries pretty quickly, and also you can sand it straight away, which is a vast help for something like this, which is going to need a little bit of sanding. Now the trouble with this glue, this super glue, is what we call, it's got like a 10 seconds gap before it goes off, and that's what it says on the bottle, but in reality it's more like 30. So it's quite a slow setting super glue, which takes its time to get going. But to speed things up, what you can use is a kicker, just like this. It's a CA kicker, you give it a squirt, it's got a formula in there which basically sets it instantly. The second it touches, that's it, it's done. The trouble with that is that it smells, it's pretty toxic stuff, and it's not nice to work with. Okay, when we've done that from the inside, like here, if you've got a little bit of a pooling of super glue or anything else like that, you can just run it around. Just get a little bit more on a cocktail stick, and we're just going to get it in some of those gaps from the inside and let it flow down to the outside. So okay, if we just zoom you in. So okay, as you can see, we've got a sort of a join there, which is quite nasty, but because we've used the super glue, we can sand that in a few moments. Once we've got the other half in, we can sand that down and take care of that straight away. Yeah, if we were using obviously the liquid cement, you'd have to wait sort of 24 hours before that's good enough to sand again. So it's just a little speed thing to help speed things up. Now, one thing to do is that obviously down in here we've got sort of super glue marks. You can actually go along, if you wanted to, with your liquid cement and put it down on the inside if you've got little gaps, just to improve the fix. But in this type of area, it's not going to be hit or knocked or touched at any time soon, so I'm not worried about it. We'll let the super glue handle that area. So next we'll just line up the other side, and as we can see, because we've got this one in quite nicely, the other side fits quite well anyway. So, but it's the same thing, we've got gaps going on around, so we'll take care of that. So what we'll do, we'll pick an area, so we're going to go through the middle, rubber band over the back. Let's bring it out a bit so you can see better. Squish the band together a little bit. Obviously we've got some pretty nasty joins here, there and everywhere all over it, which we'll have to take care of. And then what we'll do is we're just going to pop one around the rear, just like so. Okay, now what you want to do is sort of balance by pushing, try and get them all as level as possible. and then decide which you want to do the more work on. If you obviously, you know, with the model tend to looking down on it, so I always try and make the top seam as seamless as possible, and the bottom half I will take care of afterwards. So all we'll do, touch and flow just on the outside. Okay, and then obviously you can do from the inside as well, just a drop on the inside and let it run in through the middle. Just remember when you're doing it, it will flow along the cracks and flow under the rubber band. So if you've got too much, it will then pull up and then it will melt and you end up with marks where your rubber bands have been. So you have to watch that. There we go, we'll just go along down here. Now I'm not going to get too close to this area here because we're going to do that with super glue. So we're just getting it all roughly in position. Right, there's a little stick down here, this little vent on the tail. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take that off because at some point it will break off. So I'm just going to pinch that off. I'll keep that safe and we'll put that back on afterwards. So all we do is just balance it up each side like so, and we're just going to put a drop on the end. Let that do its bit. Like so. Then what we'll do, this gap in here, by feeling it, it's quite a nice gap, there's nothing massive problem. So what we're going to do, we're going to touch and we'll see if we can weld it with the glue rather than going around with the actual super glue or a filler. So we've put that on. Now what we'll do, just holding it for a few seconds just to pinch it, let it dry off totally, so it's touch dry, and then what we'll do, we'll get another rubber band, just like so, and then we're going to, because it's dry now, the glue won't melt all the way around the sides, and we're just going to put quite a tight rubber band and hope, and there we go, it's going to pinch that entire thing together. Then just check it, make sure you're all happy with the way it's sitting, just like that. Now whilst we've got the super glue out for filling, what we've got is this little gaps like in here. So all we do, we take our super glue on a cocktail stick and we'll just make a little pull that entire area. Now the trouble with super glue is obviously when it dries, it sort of makes a cup. It's like a little dip shape. So a way to get around that problem is put a nice little blob on there, then hold it upside down like that, and obviously because it's underneath, you'll get a little ball, and as that dries you can sand that off very easily. Now just for me, for here, I'm just going to give it a squirt of kicker just to speed things up a little bit. So we're giving it a squirt of kicker and we're just going to hold it just for a minute or two to let it pull up the other way. It's one of those things where I can't really show you until it's done, so we'll just let that do a minute.